of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Phil. All right, item number 3 on the agenda is citizen comments. Mitch, any at this time?
There are none at this time.
All right, number 4 on the agenda is approval of a correction of minutes of the August 15th meeting. Those are all in your packet and appear to be in order. Any corrections or additions?
No, sir.
Not seeing any, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting.
Motion to approve the meeting minutes from August,
Second.
and a second. All those in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Number 5 is new business. Looks like we have 3 tonight, Mitch. Signed setback variance for Mr. Spurlock, and a zoning variance for Francis Valerio. We'll start with the racetrack petroleum sign setback variance.
This is a requested setback variance for an interstate sign of 269 feet. The sign ordinance states that an interstate sign must be set back a minimum of 600 feet from the nearest residential district, which a 269-foot variance would make the setback of 331 feet from the nearest residential district. Proposal is to place the sign in a sign easement on an undeveloped plot of land that borders I-24 West at the Almaville entrance ramp. No part of this parcel or the parcel in which the site is to be located is more than 600 feet from the nearest residential district. In the application, the applicant has stated that there's 2 hardships that are present for this request. The parcel is heavily wooded and partially located within the floodplain on the opposite end of the parcel in which the sign easement is located. And then the characteristics of the interchange involved a multitude of interstate signs which are already present, and there are also lots of commercial industrial districts that surround the interchange as well. Chapter 9, Section F2 of the sign ordinance lists criteria that must be considered by the board when evaluating a variance request. The particular surrounding shape, topographic conditions of the specific property involved would result in an exceptional hardship upon the owner as distinguished from a mere inconvenience. Parcel upon which the sign is requested to be placed is wooded on one end and open on the other end where the sign easement is located. There is a portion of the parcel in the wooded area which is located within the 100-year floodplain as well. Conditions upon which the petition for a variance is based would not be applicable to other similarly situated properties. Sign ordinance requires setback of 600 feet from the nearest residential district for interstate signs. In this instance, the residential district that is in discussion is at no point at closest more than 600 feet from the interstate. Hardship has not been created by the applicant or any persons having an interest in the property. The applicant in this case is the developer of the gas station, which is located on a separate nearby tract of land. Financial returns have not or shall not be considered as a basis for granting a variance. Property owner has not identified financial returns as a reason for requesting the variance, though marketing this development is one of the reasons stated for needing the interstate sign. Variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare, injurious to other property, or to the intent and spirit of the ordinance. The variance would not have any of the above effects, and the variance does not confer a special privilege to the applicant that is denied to the others. Staff finds approval of the variance may confer a special privilege on the applicant since challenges on the lot as stated are under A and B are somewhat unique to this property. Staff recommends approval due to the hardship that in this instance the residential district in the discussion is at no point at closest more than 600 feet from the interstate. With the proposed interstate sign to be placed on the same side of the interstate as the residences, it would be difficult to find any location which is further than 600 feet from the residential district in question. I have a couple of pictures from today out at the site. This is taken from the road, Seven Oaks Boulevard, looking back towards the interstate. Just one standing on the sidewalk in front of the houses at that same site. Just an aerial photography picture taken. The outline box is denoting where the sign easement is currently located, just showing visually about approximately 331 feet from the nearest residential district. Then one other picture just visually describing what I was talking about with the 600 feet buffer away from the residential district. So the blue shaded area defines the area in which the interstate signs can be located, which is a 2,000 foot radius from the intersection of I-24 and Almaville, and then that which intersects the 600 foot buffer from those residential districts right there. So basically it's saying that there's just basically a small portion of the this side of the interstate in which an interstate sign can be located in the small little triangle spot right here, which is also heavily inside either the floodplain or floodway at that site, as the creek runs right past there. Other than that, though, that's it.
All right, thank you, Mitch. At this time, I would like to close the Board of Zoning Appeals and open a public hearing for anyone who would like to speak for or against this request. If you will, please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Drew Cunningham, with Racetrack Petroleum, 200 Gallery Parkway, Atlanta, Georgia, 30339. I had a presentation but didn't think ahead and bring it, and staff did a wonderful job walking through the hardships that we've described. So if y'all have any questions or concerns, I'd love to answer those, but I think they hit the nail on the head. We're really just trying to avoid messing around with the floodplain or some of that dense vegetation. We'd like to leave the vegetation in place.
What kind of lighting will the sign have?
It's LED, so it'd be just and we're only doing one price, so it'd be our regular price on the reddish LEDs. I believe the Speedway that's on the opposite corner has a similar sign. I think there's changes, but since they have a truck component,
So
I think
no
there's
directional spotlights or anything
changes. No,
like
so
that?
it would be stagnant. It wouldn't change between prices. It would only change as we change the price of fuel, which is a few times a
So
day.
no flashing lights either, okay?
No, sir.
Perfect. Any other questions, anyone? No, all right, thank you.
Thank y'all.
All right, anyone else speak for or against the request? Not seeing any, I will close the public hearing, reopen the Board of Zoning Appeals for discussion. Mitch, one question I have is, and I didn't see it on any of our drawings, the land that's undeveloped on this side of Seven Oaks Boulevard, is it any of that residential today, zoned residential?
On this side that
Yeah.
the signs look, no, that's all commercial.
It's all commercial, right?
Except for you get further north, there's apartments up there.
Okay.
But all this right here is all commercial.
Yeah, I was just concerned that adjacent land on either side of the sign may develop as residential if it was zoned that way already.
Yeah, this one right here is already developed, this parcel right here.
Right.
It's already developed commercial, but you got commercial all spread throughout here.
Okay. So by doing this, obviously, if we approve this, we would potentially open this up for anyone else that builds in these commercial properties. They may have a similar situation depending on what they do with them. So just keep that in mind, that this may not be the only request at this particular piece of property, because all those are commercial and they're gonna all have the same problem with the way that development developed there. But I think there is sufficient hardship to support it. There's really no way you could build anything, put a sign there at all and be 600 feet from the houses.
Has there been any phone calls or communications from residents anywhere in the neighborhood that had anything to say?
I got a call yesterday or 2 days ago from a woman that was inquiring what the sign out at the property was about. Gave her the information, didn't really say for or against it, just informational purposes.
Okay.
Are there density restraints? Like, if this is the first sign and those other properties do develop, like you mentioned, like you can only have so many signs within distance, distance. I mean, can they just pack them all in? Or is it some kind of restrictions there as well?
There is a distance requirement. I'm not sure off the top of my head what it
Okay.
is, but there
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a density number, but there is a distance,
Right.
for sure. Okay.
I mean, the fact that there are commercial buildings, over there on that side, and that, it likely could be that, does make it a little bit easier to listen to versus if it were residential.
Right.
I mean, at that point, I don't want to start something and then have that problem later.
Yeah, it's almost like, I'm gonna be honest, I can't speak for all of the council, but probably we would question putting residential this close to commercial today. This residential is a little out of place. It's kind of surrounded by commercial with the exception of the backside there. And it's a little close to the interstate and that exit route anyway. So if this was coming before council today, there would be a lot of discussion about the location in proximity to commercial anyway.
I mean, is there an opportunity for future rezoning of this area in which we put a sign and now we have a problem? Because right now it's nothing there, correct?
That's right, and remember, half of this is floodplain, so the part where the sign is pretty much the only developable property, probably.
There is also a detention pond right here as well on the parcel.
Right.
So,
That's what it looked like, one of the pictures, I could see an outline.
mhm.
So that being said, it'd be pretty limited.
That's right. That actually does make that a little bit easier to listen to.
Okay? Any more questions? Any motions?
I'll make a motion to approve the setback variance of 331 feet nearest to the residential district.
269 feet.
The difference of 331 and 600.
Yeah, okay, 269.
269.
Okay, we have a motion eventually. Anyone want to second it?
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion is approved.
I saw 331 first.
Next item on our agenda, thank you for coming, appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
Next item on our agenda is setback variance for Mr. Spurlock on Hutchinson Drive. Mitch?
The applicant has requested a side setback variance for a detached carport that is already existing on the property. Requested variance is for 4.5 feet, which would make the detached carport approximately 3.5 feet away from the side setback line. Property is zoned R1, low-density, single-family residential, and is approximately 0.43 acres in size. Minimum yard requirements for any detached structures in this district is 8 feet. Existing carport is approximately 23 by 20.5 feet in size, roughly measured, and has been there for over 15 years according to the applicant. Carport was constructed without applying for and being granted a building permit as well. The board shall not grant a variance unless it makes findings based upon evidence presented as it follows. The particular physical surroundings, shape, topographic conditions of the specific property involved that would result in a particular hardship upon the owner is distinguished from a mere inconvenience. Staff finds the lot is fairly uniform in shape and topography would not result in any particular hardship. The conditions upon which the petition for a variance is based would not be applicable generally to other property in the same district. Staff finds this lot is fairly similar in shape and size to the other properties located within the R1 district. Variance will not authorize activities in a zone district other than those permitted by this ordinance. Detached structures are permitted by right in the R1 district but are to adhere to all setbacks. The alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. A carport was placed by the applicant without applying for the necessary permits for detached accessory structures. Granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. Staff finds that the variance requested would provide the applicant with special privileges due to the lack of hardship. The variance is the minimum that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, structure, or building. Staff find the requested setback variance may be the minimum to make reasonable use of the structure for the proposed use. The granting of the variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the area. Staff finds the variance should not have any of the above effects. Proposed variance will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property, substantially increase the congestion in the public streets, increase the danger of fire, endanger the public safety, or substantially diminish or impair property values. Staff finds the requested variance should not have any of the above effects. Number 10 is not applicable in this case, and staff would recommend denial of this request due to the fact that there appears to be no hardship pertaining to this request. A couple of pictures out at the site today. This is taken from the neighboring property, just looking at the carport. And just a closer picture up of the carport. And then the next picture is going to show basically where the property line is approximately located in conjunction with the existing carport. That is it.
So that carport, the side picture you had there, it's 3.5 feet, the property line is 3.5 feet from the post there.
Roughly speaking.
So it's not quite to that, to those wooden timbers, right?
Yeah, based on this picture, you can kind of gauge where it's at. Looking at this, It's roughly sitting right around where those ties are at.
Gotcha. Okay. At this time, I'll close the Board of Zoning Appeals and open a public hearing for anyone who'd like to speak for or against this request. Please come forward, state your name and your address, please.
My name is Angela Hamilton. I reside at 112 Hutchinson Drive, which is the embankment side.
Okay, so the side left on the picture here? Okay.
Correct. I foolishly dug out my embankment years ago with the intent of putting in, I had the Bobcat, I was leveling off property of my father's on the other side, and I still had time on it. I work out of state, I came back, it was already, the driveway was poured and the carport was there. I was mortified, I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to do anything because I didn't want to damage their property. I attempted year after year to plant different things on the embankment, which looked like crap, and I tore it out and tried something else, tore it out, tried something else. And someone put in some railroad ties just to kind of hold it in place. I work out of state. I was in the National Guard doing drill weekends. I had a mother that was ill in Dallas, Texas. I was back and forth taking care of that. And I had other priorities, financial priorities, et cetera. And the property wasn't mine at the time. It was my father's. But I had permission to be there. So I didn't address the situation, and I hadn't had time, money, or energy to address it. I'm addressing it now because I can't get any kind of equipment in there without damaging their property to put in a retaining wall. I had a broken foot at one time, came out from recuperating. I had planted red tip bushes. I had no idea how big they got. I came outside, they were cut about 2 feet from the ground. So I had the property surveyed, and I marked it off and left it there for 2 weeks. That was my way of communicating. Unfortunately, there's been a tit for tat going on for quite a while, and it was instigated from another neighbor. And it's poor communication on both of our parts. However, it's an elephant in the room right now. I can't do anything with my embankment. I've already had foundation work done because of the erosion. I can't pour a driveway. That was another thing. I had someone mowing my yard. Rocks were flying over to the car. And I put some plastic up on their carport. I haven't done anything prior to that. I've got pictures of it. Trying to protect their car. Came back from a trip again, and it was pulling down. I was afraid of damaging their property, so I took it down. I left a note that did they want it or not. There was no reply to the corrugated plastic. So I'm appealing, I'm asking that it be retracted back. Also, I've had several people come out to give me estimates, and one of the things that was said is because of how large, how long, how wide the carport is, the velocity of water that's coming out of that, the downspouts are actually on my property. They've complained that there's dirt plugging into their French drain. Well, of course it is, because of the volume of water, that's facing, their downspouts are facing my property. So, I mentioned to them, well, I don't know what to tell you. That's the lowest part of your yard where the water is pulling. And I don't have the pictures of the water, but I have some other pictures of, may I come up?
Sure. The pictures that we have, who brought?
Applicant.
Okay, all right.
This is where I've attempted to plant things, and then I had planted some trees at one time, and I started pulling everything out because I'm afraid of damaging the property. I'm afraid of roots. If I get equipment in there, I'm afraid of hitting their downspouts. When my Vietnam vet land guy that was mowing my yard, when I found out that rocks were flying, I did that. I can't pour a driveway because it's going to crack up. And these are just these pictures. And I took one that way to show that is the property line where the fence is.
It's the back of the property.
Okay. Let's see this. Do you want these back?
If you need them,
So
fine.
I can collect them, it's whatever you
Okay,
wanted.
okay.
She'll say that one.
Yeah.
That's the really property.
I think if there would have been a communication, hey, what are you planning on doing since you've
Yep.
dug
Can-
out?
Sorry, can you go back to the microphone,
Sure.
just so we have it on record? We can't hear you on the tape.
Okay. I think had there been communication, Angie, what do you plan on doing? You've dug this out, what are you doing? And given me an opportunity to communicate and maybe us dialogue about it, it would have been a different scenario maybe. I still, what the dialogue would have been that I need enough room to get equipment in there to dig it out. And, that would have been, I've kept my mouth shut, and I have done, my dad was kind of a thorn in the neighborhood side. There was a lot of code violations. I moved here to try to help my dad out. I've done everything I can to keep property clean, and appease and kind of reverse bad karma. And, they made a comment one time that the trees were, that squirrels were getting in, they were afraid of squirrels getting up on their house. So I cut the whole darn tree line down. I had planted all the trees on the tree line where the fence was, to kind of just buffer some of the bad karma between us. But, so the bottom line is, the bottom line is I can't do anything. And I've got ground erosion.
Okay, so, just so I understand, so you own the property now, do you live
Correct.
there or no?
I live there and I own it.
Okay, and the primary concern you have is that you can't get equipment in there because of his carport?
Correct. Without, either if I got equipment in there, it could possibly crack the cement. If I got equipment in there, it could possibly,
So just
Hit
so
the
you,
supports.
just so you understand, the carport's on his property. Even if the carport wasn't there, unless
The-
he grants you permission, you couldn't put equipment on his property anyway.
correct.
Okay,
That's why I'm here. The supports are actually the property line. I had it surveyed. If we need to survey it again, we can survey it again.
yeah, so is the numbers,
The lines I have available to me are rough numbers. It's not 100% accurate unless we have a survey done to it. So just based on the measurements I got from our aerial photography and the parcel lines we have available to us, that was what I concluded as the numbers. So it may be different, but that was just numbers I got based on what we have available.
Then I request we have it surveyed again and I've already paid for it once, so they can pay for it this time.
That changes the whole,
well,
That changes
it
the
definitely
entire-
changes what the variance request
Yeah.
is, right?
if there's a question.
I would say, though, that's gonna be a boundary dispute that they would need to settle in court, not
Yeah.
before the Board of Zoning.
That's what I was kind of thinking, is I can't really rule on that, that would be a court issue.
Okay, well, we can either dialogue with each other
Yeah, I
about
think-
it and maybe come up with a compromise, or we can go to court.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate part is you're both neighbors, and you've lived, I guess, close to each other for a while, even if it was your dad before. So it's unfortunate that there can't be a compromise reached. I'm gonna be honest, I don't want to, well, I won't say that, never mind. Okay, anything else? Any more questions? Yeah. Any more questions?
Can I grab the receipt?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. All right, anyone else like to speak for or against, please come to the microphone, state your name and address, please.
I'm Charles Spurlock. I live at 110 Hutchinson Drive. I applied for the setback variance. We bought the house 21 years ago. It was a rental house. The gutters were literally hanging off the front of the house. Needed a lot of work, which we've been working on. Ms. Hamilton's had a lot of time on different plans that she said were gonna be a concrete barrier wall and different things that fell through. I waited 6 years with a messy driveway, and either way, I don't want any more equipment on my driveway if the carport wasn't there, because it's been damaged before without even asking permission to be there.
Okay.
But it does help a lot with the erosion I had, especially after she had the Bobcat, my gravel's there, it really kind of trenched it out, made a big mud puddle. That does help shed a lot of water out of my back door. Without it, the water's got up to my back door there when it rains hard, so it would be a hardship.
Understand. Questions?
Also, if I may add, the carport was built by Home Building Products in Murfreesboro. I had no idea there was never, excuse me, a permit applied for until this complaint came up in the last month.
So contractor built it.
Yes, sir.
We have pictures of the receipt for where we paid for that, if y'all need to see those.
Yeah, we don't. I believe
We
you.
were under that impression.
Okay.
So,
Any questions, comments, anything? All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else would like to speak for or against this request? Not seeing anyone, I'll close the public hearing and reopen the Board of Zoning Appeals for discussion. This is a little bit of a tough one. My initial inclination is the carport's been there 15 years. I understand there's lots of reasons for why it hasn't come forward now, but it kind of stinks that it's coming forward now. But the other issue we have is there's really no hardship to approve the variance, and that's a problem as well. So we have to figure that out, guys. That's the tough part. There are, I think even in one of the aerial views, there's a house on the other side of this house that looks like it has the same type of situation. Don't know how far it is from the line, but I know all along Hutchinson, these houses don't have garages, so carports are very common. Not having a permit, I had a patio cover put up at my house and had a contractor, I think maybe the same contractor, built the patio cover at my house, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if they pulled a permit or not. I've never checked. So I assume when you hire a contractor that's doing business in the town, you assume they're gonna take care of things, although it does fall to the property owner to make sure. So it is, unfortunately, but to me, that shouldn't really weigh into this at this point. It's 15 years old. My concern is doing the right thing. And unfortunately, I'm not sure what that is.
Our struggle is that there is no particular hardship with what our code says to be able to approve the variance, and that's what we're looking at. There's nothing that says the reasons given aren't the reasons for us to grant one. And that's because everything you guys have going on in your situation, there's nothing in what we have as far as the reasons to grant a variance based on any of those. They're not here. So our issue is you have had the carport for 15 years, and I read your letter also explaining all that. And I've spent actually quite a bit of time thinking about this. The conundrum is the fact that there's not a hardship based on what we see as one. And we do hear these, and we try to be consistent on, what is the reasons for granting the variance? And we do look for hardships when you feel like you have one. We just have to look one inside our parameters of what we deem as a hardship. And I think that's,
Jeff,
if I can say, what we're talking about.
Yeah, Jeff, item number 7 in the staff information says that the variance is the minimum that makes possible reasonable use of the land and building or structure, and the staff finds that the requested setback may be the minimum to make reasonable use of the structure for the proposed use. Since the structure is already there, and this is, even staff says, probably the most reasonable amount that we could grant to make it used for this, is that enough for us to consider an approval?
I would caution you on the amount of time that it's been there as any type of a reason. And the only reason, obviously, no one likes to tell someone if it's been there for so long, but at the same time, you don't want to reward folks if they can go undetected long enough that they can not have the codes enforced as someone that just put one up yesterday. Your decision on this one, I think we'll have to, reading the materials, is whether you believe that the stated reasons of the flooding, if you have your findings of fact or whatever, you think that it's a significant enough topo issues that cause the water displacement with the driveway and those types of things due to the lay of the lot, whether that is significant enough hardship for you or not. But main point being, understand the personal human side of 15 years, but I would just caution you not to utilize it.
Okay. Mr. Spurlock, I'm going to close the Board of Zoning Appeals and ask you to come back to the microphone for a public hearing. I'd like to ask you a couple questions. We have this picture, and I think another one here where it kind of shows from the end of your driveway towards. Can you tell me a little bit about the driveway slope right there? It looks like it slopes down a little bit and kind of towards your house.
It is a pretty long drive.
And the hill comes off. In this picture, the Suburban or whatever that's sitting on the left side, is the left side of the driveway pretty much level to the right side, or is it higher, lower? What happens to the water when it runs off the end of that carport? Is it running across your driveway?
Well, it pretty much fills up from the back forward, like the back end of the carport, the backyard edge.
So if the carport wasn't there, how does that change, in your mind, how does that change how the water's gonna flow?
It's gonna kind of remove about a 24 by 24 umbrella over my driveway and back door.
So when the water runs out the end of those spouts, it doesn't run back under the carport?
I put a corner, at the back corner where that truck is, there's an underground pipe that goes down into my driveway or backyard, in the middle of my backyard. But it's, with the erosion coming off the bank, it gets full of gravels and mud quite a bit, but I can clean it out. It will drain the water off the back end of the driveway.
You have a door on that side of the house?
Yes, sir. About midways there's a white storm door. That's our entrance door that we use.
To help run that water off, have you considered like a positive drain system or some type of weed pipe or something to where that water comes in to help keep directing that towards the back? Because it does look like it slopes back, where if water hit a positive drain, it would take it back. Because that's kind of a separate issue from this carport, is what I'm hearing, is we're talking about drainage issues and trying to see if there was a hardship there.
Yeah, what I'm
But if
thinking.
a positive drain could be installed or some system to help drain water back, it really doesn't come into play on that.
Well, where the driveway is, it slopes back to that left rear corner. That's where the drain is. That's where it phones it to
Gotcha.
and removes it from the carport area.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, you'd like to re-speak? Can you come back to the microphone, please?
When you purchase a house that has a door facing an embankment, you're going to have problems. Cement equals flooding. If they would have maybe cut a hole in the cement right where that vehicle is, the water would seep down into the ground, and that might help. They only have 2 downspouts, one on each end. And it's not enough because of the volume, how big the carport is. And the downspouts are facing the dirt. So yes, there is going to be dirt erosion going into the French drain. And the water pools right up underneath that car.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing, reopen the Board of Zoning Appeals. So what my thought process there was is if the carport's not there, where's the water going to go? It's going to rain down onto the driveway. And what I was concerned with is right now the water's being carried to the end of the driveway. And then although it may not all run away, it's not coming back all the way to the door of the house. The carport is keeping the water away from the house and then out to the back to that French drain. And that's where my thought process was, is if it's not there, are we gonna create a situation where water's gonna roll back in to the house?
If it's sloping back and down, which it looks like it is, we're not looking, I can't tell if that picture is perfectly level, but it looks like it goes back and away.
Yeah, I can't tell. That's why I was
If it goes
asking.
back and away, it's not gonna go towards the side of that house. It's gonna go back towards that
The
backyard.
only thing is with the bank to the left there, I don't see how it could go back the other way. The land
Well,
comes
that's,
out.
that's why it's pulling there for sure, because everything is
There's a
sitting in
hole there,
that
'cause there's a
spot.
cliff on the left side and then
Yeah.
a house on the right side.
Right.
And if you look further down the property line, there's an embankment there, but that embankment continues, like,
Kinda tails off.
for a while
Yeah.
down there.
And that's what those landscape timbers were I saw back there.
Well, even further
that-
down,
That
yeah.
retaining wall at some point, yeah.
Yep. Come back to the mic, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
The lowest part of their yard is where their vehicles are. It slopes up in the back and it slopes up in the front.
Okay. So it all slopes towards your bank?
It's, the lowest part of their yard is right underneath the carport.
That's what it looks like.
But when you pour cement, you're going to have flooding. If they wouldn't have poured cement, it would be,
But
the water would go down into the ground.
That's really not the conversation.
Okay.
Right? I mean, he can pour concrete over,
Okay,
that's a different problem.
okay.
Sure.
At the back of the driveway where the truck is parked, from that point down, it breaks all the way down. It's a pretty good slope on the backside. I don't know if any of the pictures would show that from the aerial. But everything pretty much from the right of the driveway in the front slopes down to my other driveway, or neighbor, and in the back it slopes down.
That is so hard to tell.
Okay, thank you.
So on top of the
It's
car-
because of not having the levelness, there's,
Yeah.
it's all a matter of perspective.
What's that on the carport is going towards the back? Where is
Well,
that
that's my
water coming from?
question, is keeping the carport, if that's the question, or we're trying to see if we're finding a hardship because of this flooding issue. That's the
Right.
only thing we're looking at,
Right.
because I can't see another
That-
thing.
That's all I'm trying to say, is if we rule against this and the carport comes down, are we creating a situation where water's gonna roll back either under or into his house? And from this picture, although it's not what we heard, from this picture, it looks like that would happen.
Of course, carport would be coming over, right? Because the variance is what,
Well,
3.5?
No, if we approve the variance, the carport would not move.
Right, but I'm saying if we deny this.
If it gets denied, they can
and
still
if he
keep some
wanted
of it.
to still
He
have a
could
carport,
shorten
it's
it.
just gonna have to be shortened. You
Yeah,
could still cover
it
a
would
great deal
essentially
of
be
that.
1.5 foot car, or 1.5 car carport at that point. So yes, you're right.
But it would
could.
still take care of the water issue.
It's possible, yes. Yes.
Or you have twice as much, or you have half the amount of water that you,
Right.
because now you're still getting water in the back corner of the,
Yeah, and I don't know if that makes it worse. Now it runs off onto the concrete, where right now it runs off into the ground. So now all the water is gonna be on the concrete instead of part on the ground and only what can't soak in.
I mean, the question is, do we have enough information here
Yeah,
to
I
see
don't
this as
know.
a hardship? I don't think I have enough, but on the same point, we want to get this right for everybody. That's why we're having the discussion.
I have a question as far as if we didn't have it there and she decided to go on her side and do any kind of construction, which she's done before without our permission, then how is that gonna affect us later on? I mean, it's still gonna cause a flooding issue.
Yeah,
or whatever she does.
that goes back to our previous comment about a property rights issue, and that's something that a court would have to get involved with.
Right, we're only considering the carport issue, and all these others are things, but they're not for us to consider to rule on here.
Yeah, to your point, it could happen, but that would be something the court and the judge would have to be involved
Is
with.
there a grandfather clause as far as it's been there almost
Yeah,
16 years?
the only way something is grandfathered in is if it was built prior to the current ordinance being put in place. In this case, 8 foot was there when it was built.
Understand.
So it's not grandfathered, even if it'd been there 30 years. If the 8 foot minimum was there then it still applies. And I did ask that question. I actually talked to Mr. Rigsby and asked him, what's, or no, I think it was Jeff. I talked to someone, I'm sorry, Dennis Johnson, to find out how long is this 8 foot set. It's been there a long time. So it was not, the carport was not built before the ordinance was put in place.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think we beat a horse. I guess this is one of the times, usually we are all in agreement, it's very easy.
May I ask one more
Did-
question?
Sure. If you can come back to the microphone.
How does the cement driveway, how does that roll into all of this? Because it is right up to the property line.
concrete can be poured right up to the line with no issue.
Okay,
So, yeah, there's,
okay.
as long as it's not over
So
on
if
your
I
property.
tried to get
then
equipment in there and I accidentally cracked the cement,
Yeah,
then I'm
you-
held liable?
If you're on his property, yes.
Okay.
That was something I was gonna mention when you said that earlier, but our issue is the carport. But yeah,
Right.
the concrete's a different issue. It doesn't have the same type of
Yeah.
side
He-
setbacks.
He would need
The
to grant
carport
you
does.
permission to do anything on his property.
It's not his property, there's an easement. There's a property line, an easement, and then the property, correct?
There's no easement, the 8 foot is not an easement, it's still his property. He's just not allowed to build up to 8 feet from the property line. He still owns all the way to the property line.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's his line, it's his property up to the
I didn't
line.
I did not know
Yeah,
that.
it's not that his carport's in an easement, his carport's fully on his property. It's just that you are not allowed to build all the way up to the property a structure. You can pour concrete right up to the property line, but not a structure. And that's the issue, is the carport is too close to the property line.
Okay,
Right, like immediate compliance would be the concrete stays, the driveway stays where it is, and the carport is shorter by what we're looking at, just where it's the 8
3.5
feet.
so what do you recommend I do to prevent erosion of my embankment? Which I screwed up,
Well,
I did it.
Since you asked me what my recommendation is, this isn't as a councilman, this is as a citizen.
Hold on.
I won't say that. So you're gonna need to ask his permission. If he doesn't grant your permission, then you're gonna have to figure out a way to do it without him encroaching on his property. And I don't know
Oh,
how
I
you
can do that.
An
I can do
engineer,
that.
somebody would have to be
Okay,
involved.
thank you.
Yes,
One last question. I believe it was this month or last month, there's a new setback property ordinance for, there was like almost 300 home subdivision that was 5 feet.
yeah, that particular is actually, we did approve one, there's another one that's 7.5 feet. That's because it was approved as part of a
Special.
PRD, which is a planned residential development. It wasn't just R1 or R3. If it had been the same zone, it's not the same zoning as your property.
So I couldn't apply for anything like that.
No.
Okay,
No.
all right, thank you.
Good try, though.
We're like 10 feet apart from the
Yeah.
house.
Okay. Any motions? Any discussion?
Question is, property line is infinite up, right? So like the post is I guess the roof line and the post, like the post can't just move in, it has to be the whole structure. Like you can't just move the post in, that's 3.5 feet.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it would still be, the variance would be needed for over there.
The roof,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, based on staff recommendation and based on what we've heard from Jeff, because we can't let the 15-year heartstrings come in, there's no hardship here about what we say. That's what I'm looking at. And that's a painful statement to make, but I'm looking at what the
Is-
criteria is, because the only thing we're considering is the flooding issue, and I don't know if we have anything credible enough to.
Is that a motion?
Not yet. This is discussion, guys. No, that is not a motion yet. I'm still in discussion here.
Is there any way to request a flooding survey, something?
What's our options? A couple of questions that are still kind of out there. We really don't know where the property line is. And I guess it's up to the owner to tell us or provide some sort of flood or engineering study on what the water would do, right?
Yes, and they could, I mean, you could always, if they felt that they could bring back further, you could always defer it for a month if you felt you didn't have enough information. So they wouldn't have to apply again, but
Yeah.
you may want to ask them if that's even something that they're willing to
Okay,
do.
Mr. Spurlock, could you come back to the microphone, please? I don't need to close the,
I think you can ask.
yeah. So the question at the table here is, are you willing to come back to us with some professional advice on what the flooding situation may or might be if the carport is there or isn't there? Our concern is that we don't want to create a hardship for you. We don't want to create a situation where water's running back into your house. But unfortunately, we don't have a hardship to just approve it at this point. If there was engineering study or something that showed that flooding or removal of the carport would put water back onto your house, then that potentially could be a hardship we could consider. But unfortunately, there's not enough information, and the city really wouldn't, it's on your property, we wouldn't go do that for you.
Could Mr. Johnson stand at the driveway in the front and rear, and you can see that this is more or less the highest property. It
Yeah,
drops
he-
almost the same amount on the other side.
He doesn't really, I mean, he just pretty much enforces what we decide, so. I wouldn't want to get our engineer, city employees involved, because if they made a statement that's inaccurate or had a different opinion, then we could be liable. So it would have to be, it would have to be an engineer that you hired or somebody that you employed. But if you're not willing to do that or spend the money, then I don't want to waste your time either, so. But I think based on the information we have, it sounds like if we have to rule now, there's no hardship. But if you're willing to put more time or effort into trying to prove the hardship, we can defer to give you another month to do so. But that's up to you.
That require another $250?
No, that's the point. If we defer, you would not have to reapply. If we rule and you find later that it does cause a problem, you would have to reapply, and it would cost more money.
I might just take that avenue.
Okay, you take which avenue?
I guess I'll narrow the width of the carport.
Okay, all right.
And what does it need to be, another?
Yeah, we'll get that. That's gonna be the next conversation. But we'll figure that out. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, so, the next piece is where is the property line? And I think I don't know how we'll figure that out, but.
I would just say, because obviously could be a boundary dispute. I think that if you decided,
I
of
think
course you can't, it doesn't sound like you're going to decide there is a hardship, so you couldn't do a variance anyway if
Yeah.
there's no hardship. However, it's going to be whatever the ordinance states for that number of feet from the property line. So as long as it matches up with what we believe to be the property line, then that's what the town's going to enforce unless someone shows us different.
Gotcha. Okay, sure.
The land survey was done by Huddleston on Lowry, so I can get a copy of that, and do I bring it in to you?
That would be helpful, I think, if we brought it into Mitch, just so that we could verify what we have versus what they're showing.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think it would be helpful. You probably should, if you're willing to share the nut line, but that's between you guys. He's gonna need it, I think. All right, do we have a motion now? We gotta make a motion.
We do. Let me make sure I'm clear. Was he willing
He
to,
was willing to narrow the carport if
So-
needed.
so deny and just cut it back?
That was what he was willing to do.
Just making sure he's good with that, because, yeah, I think that's the best case in this. I think that's the best. So you're okay cutting this back to be in compliance with the 8 feet? Okay, well then I will move to deny the request because there appears to be no particular hardship.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of denying, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the request to grant a variance is denied. I would encourage you to find that property line. Mostly work with Kevin and Mitch to identify what the town recognizes as the property line, and make sure you're there 8 feet from that line when you put your poles back up, so you're not back here again. And I hope that you guys can find a way to work together. You live pretty close to each other, so you're gonna unfortunately need to try to get along, I hope.
It's just the
Thank you.
bullying. I'm reacting to being bullied.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is zoning variance for Francis Valeria.
This is a zoning variance request at 108 Winchester Lane for 288 square feet to construct an accessory storage shed. The property is zone R1 and the size is approximately 1.99 acres. And the zoning ordinance states for lots between 1 and 3 acres in size, the maximum allowable accessory structure for detached buildings may be 1,200 square feet. The applicant applied for a building permit, noting the existing square footage being less than what actually existed on the property, and at that time was granted the 288 square foot garage space addition, being it would have still calculated below the maximum allowed of 1,200 square feet based on what was stated by the applicant. A courtesy inspection was conducted by the codes department and was found the actual existing square footage of the building exceeded 1,200 square feet, rather than the previously noted 768 square feet, which was put on the building permit application submitted by the applicant. It was also found that only the footers had been dug for the applied 288 square foot addition, so that is as far as the applicant has gotten so far, is with the footers. As is the existing 32 by 38 foot, which is 1,216 square foot of structure on the property, which exceeds the maximum detached accessory square footage by 16 square feet. Total accessory square footage on a lot with the requested variance of 288 square feet would be 1,504 square feet. A permit was originally applied for around 2008 for a detached structure. In 2011, another permit was applied for of 432 square feet of maximum allowed for the detached structure. The board shall not grant variance unless it makes findings based upon evidence presented as it follows. Particular physical surroundings, shape, topographic conditions of the specific property involved that would result in a particular hardship upon the owner as distinguished from mere inconvenience. Staff finds there is no specific hardship present. The existing structure already exceeds the detached accessory square footage that is allowed on a lot of this size. Conditions upon which a petition for a variance is based would not be applicable generally to other property in the same district. Staff finds there are no unique conditions regarding this property. The variance would not authorize activities in a zone district other than those permitted by the ordinance. Customary accessory buildings or structures are allowed by right in residential lots of this size, but are not to exceed 1,200 square feet. Alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. The alleged difficulty or hardship was created by the applicant. Misinformation was provided on the building permit application form. That granting the variance request will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. Staff finds the variance requested will provide the applicant with special privileges denied by the ordinance to other lands, buildings, or structures in the R1 district due to no applicable hardship. The variance is the minimum that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. Staff finds the requested size of the accessory building already exceeds the maximum allowed square footage and is not required to have the requested additional square footage on this lot. The granting of the variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or interest to other properties or improvements in the area. Staff finds the variance will not have any of the above effects, and then 9 and 10 are not applicable. Staff would recommend approval of the variance of 16 square feet to bring the existing building into compliance that is already over the maximum allowed amount, but to deny the additional 288 square feet due to no apparent hardship present. And this is the currently the only existing detached structure at the proposed lot. And then this is just a greater shot. The existing house principal structure is located right here, and then the detached structure is right there. That is it.
Okay, so that I'm clear, because there's a lot of different numbers in here. So there's an existing structure that's 1,216 feet.
Correct.
And then they've requested a permit for an additional 768 square feet?
For an additional 288.
Next 288.
They had originally put
Permit
70.
768.
I got you. That's existing.
So we've actually got two different things to discuss here. One is the just granting the 16 foot
16
for the
foot.
existing structure, and then the other one would be if we allow the second. So there's actually two motions here.
Yeah, okay. All right, at this time, I'll close the Board of Zoning Appeals and open public hearing for anyone who'd like to speak for or against this request. Please come forward. State your name and address, please.
Francis Valerio, 108 Winchester Lane, Smyrna, Tennessee. It's already been stated it was a simple mistake when we applied for the building permit for the 12 by 24 building. It's a metal shed. And so I'm kind of speaking on behalf of my dad here. I've been helping my mom and dad on their property. So with the courtesy inspection that came out, because we're trying to figure out how to build this thing with the footer and et cetera, that's when they measured the existing structure that's there, the garage with the addition, and they said that we don't qualify, basically. So we had the Bobcat work, we dug the footer by hand, and so it's kind of embarrassing, actually, but here we are. And so, yeah, the main reason we wanted the additional building was we got a lot of building supplies in the other one's crammed. We just wanted to move them over there so we have some space to work. That's really the main reason. There's an additional acre that my dad owns to the right-hand side of the garage. It's a non-perk property. It'd be on the other side. But it doesn't perk, so we can't put a structure there for housing lawn equipment or the wood that we're wanting to store, et cetera. So that's kind of where we're at, and that's why we wanted to build the building to begin with. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure about the dimensions. I forget the gentleman, Mr. Jeremy was there, and there was another gentleman that came with him. I don't remember his name, but he's the one that he started to measure things. The original garage is 24 by 32, and I measured the addition today, and it's 14 by 24. So I think that comes out to around 11, 18, but if we need to remeasure that, we can, as far as what's existing. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else that'd like to speak for or against? Not seeing anyone, we'll close the public hearing, reopen Board of Zoning Appeals for discussion. Obviously, Mitch, we got questions about the size. There seems to be some discrepancy in what he's saying versus what we're hearing. Do we have any of the measurements from Jeremy or Dennis or whoever out there?
There's a 14-foot discrepancy, 14.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what he's saying, he doesn't even need a variance right now because he's under the 1,200. Now, to build the additional, he would, but the existing wouldn't need one, if he's correct.
If he's correct, we wouldn't need it at all.
He's still adding another 2 parts.
Right, but he would still be under the 12.
He couldn't add the additional, he's still got a third. He measured 2 today, they're already there.
Oh, that 2 there already? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's technically a third.
Oh.
Well, maybe, yeah.
No, he submitted 750, they measured 11 feet.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. He had, we're saying 12, 16.
I mean, my initial thoughts are the 1216 versus 1152 doesn't equal 288. The
No, I mean,
maximum allowable
but there's 2 pieces, right? There's the
there's
piece
one.
that he's requesting to be added. I don't think there's enough there either way for that. But then whether or not we need to grant a 16-foot variance for existing structures or not may or may not apply. That's where I'm at right now. I mean, we could grant it just in case, but it sounds like he doesn't even need it. If we did grant it and 1152 is right, he could add 68 more feet or whatever. But I don't really see the point.
Right.
So we just passed through council an increase on square footage for 5 acres and larger, but I don't think we did anything below that. Is that right, Brian?
That's correct.
And is 3 foot the same as 2, or 3 acres the same as 2 acres? 1,200?
1 to 3 acres, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if it gets
So-
over 3 acres, it goes up to 15.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So 1 and 2 is the same.
Yeah, what I was trying to check
Right.
was if he has 2 pieces of property and 1 can't perk, could we consider all of the property since they own it, but it still doesn't give them enough, so it doesn't matter.
Right, that's the math I was seeing, is it kind of makes it where the 1 would be easier to do. It's a very small amount, but there's no additional either way based on that.
If he could get to 3 acres, he could go to 1,500. I don't know how big that adjoining property is. He's got 2, he's got this other tract.
So anything over 3 acres can go to 1,500, but if it's 1 foot less than 3 acres, he's gotta be under.
That's right.
1,200.
Well, that's interesting. Can we consider, since he owns both pieces of property, technically they're separate tracts,
supposed to be one
You need
track.
to combine them together.
So he could combine them into one track and then,
If he could get it to 3 acres, I don't know how big that, again, two
Okay.
tracks combined, I don't know if it's bigger or not.
all right, that's interesting, but.
It is
okay.
interesting.
It still doesn't, our variance.
No, but we've come up today with
Right now-
lots of additional
Right now, we have
things
a
that we
2 acre
can
tract
talk
for the
about.
variance that, I don't think there's enough room there. I'm not seeing a hardship. I think there may be a way out, which we could discuss with him later, but I think, the variance we have to request, or we have to review is what's in front of us.
Right,
So,
agreed.
any comments, questions, concerns, or motions?
You need to make it 2?
Um,
Yeah, there would be one to approve or not
I
on the
think-
16.
I
or-
think so, if you wanted to, if we wanted to go ahead and grant the 16 feet just in case.
If we separate the two, it would be a lot
That's
clearer,
based on-
wouldn't it?
that's Our inspector did the
Yep.
12,
Okay.
16.
Okay,
Depending, yeah, your hardship.
okay. Huh. So the question that gives me, Jeff, is what's the hardship for approving the 16 feet?
Yeah.
And if we approve that, how do we justify not approving additional with no hardship?
Exactly.
That's exactly why it was quiet.
However, I agree 100%. I will say that you could always, I mean, if dealing with the other, just for the general public and everyone else, just because someone asked for 288 doesn't mean that you would also have to grant 500 feet just because there was a hardship, because you could see what was reasonable. With the 16 feet though, you know, what is the hardship, what laying with the land that's been presented? It sounds like he might want to see if the measurements are, or we can even send somebody back out to make sure that those measurements are correct. Because it would be
14
nice
feet.
if we didn't have to grant a variance out there for that 16 feet.
Gotcha.
But, and maybe you could bifurcate this if you chose to do so. I'm not, you can do whatever you want, but
That's kind of where I was going.
but you could bifurcate it as saying, you know, whatever you deal with the 288 tonight and the 16, you could defer for one more meeting if you want to get, we could bring back more information just to double check on those figures of how he's getting such a great number less square footage than
Right,
what
that's my point. is like,
our
there's a
folks.
huge
Because there
difference.
is no hardship for either request, but the 16 is so close. If your 1152 is right, that doesn't come into question at all.
Okay.
So, yeah, I agree with everybody. So, do we rule on one?
So let's take the 288 first. I'll entertain a motion on the 288 if anybody's got one.
I will move to deny the additional 288.
Okay, we have a motion
A second.
and a second. We're denying because of no apparent hardship.
No apparent hardship.
All right, all those in favor of denial of the 288 addition, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then the second piece, Mitch, what I'd like to do is defer this to next month and have you guys go out and remeasure and bring back actual measurements to make sure, and then we would reconsider the 16 feet, square feet if it's still needed.
If you'll get a motion and second on the deferral.
Okay, so need a
Move
motion
to
for that?
defer.
Motion to defer, state a reason.
Okay. I will move to defer the variance request of the 16 square feet based on getting a better measurement.
Perfect. All right, motion and a second.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of deferral say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Don't leave. Any staff comments?
Yeah, just want to reiterate, I believe you all received an email earlier this week or last week regarding the BZA training that was going to be going on for part of the TAPA conference, fall conference in Franklin. BZA training is taking place on October 10th from 3 to 5, which is a Thursday, and then October 11th from 9 to 11 a.m., which is a Friday. So just let staff know if y'all are
What were those
interested.
dates again? October 11th and?
October 10th, Thursday and a Friday.
Okay.
Just let staff
It's a
know.
Thursday afternoon and a Friday morning for two two-hour sessions.
All right, if any of y'all would like to go, I will carpool, we can meet here and I can drive.
Staff needs to know just so we
Yeah,
can
we just
take
need to
note
let
of
them
who's
know
all
so we're
going
in the
and
schedule.
Is it attend both, or is it attend one or the other?
one or the other.
You could,
One or the other.
you can attend both, yeah. It's one price. If we register you, you can go to both.
I don't know if there was just a redundant session.
No, it's two different sessions.
Okay.
It is two different sessions.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good, because we just can't get enough of discussing the types of topics like we have today. And we want to do it better. Yeah.
Okay,
That's it.
all right, so, board members, if you'll consider those dates and let us know, if I'm the only one, then
Phil's already told us.
Yeah, I'm going.
okay, then,
I just need a check work schedule. I'm
Okay.
interested.
So we're gonna carpool no matter what.
excellent, perfect. All right, if there's nothing else, a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, they're adjourned, thank you.
Just so you know, the HUD came back and they have closed their case that no violations of fair housing occurred.
Good. Good. This is the, yeah.
That's word flip
Yeah.
powers in that, so to bring it back down.
Basically.
Do they need a hardship?